Joe Morgan died at 77 from a cruel nerve condition that slowly took away his mobility. But what most fans never saw was the suffering behind his smile, the hidden torment of a baseball genius trapped in a body that betrayed him. How he lived was far sadder than anyone knew. Joe Morgan stood just 5 feet 7 inches and weighed 160 pounds, a diminutive figure who somehow towered over baseball as one of its most brilliant minds. The contrast was striking, his small stature versus his giant impact on the game. With 2 MVPs, 2 World Series championships, and a spot in the Hall of Fame, Morgan's legacy as a player remains untouchable. But his journey through life wasn't always as smooth as his play on the field, and the contradictions that defined his career would follow him to his final days. The Cincinnati Reds' Big Red Machine dynasty of the 1970s had Morgan as its engine, the spark plug that transformed a great team into a legendary one. He wasn't just a talented player, he was a calculating strategist who understood the game at a deeper level than most, often seeing opportunities that remained invisible to others. His unorthodox batting stance with the famous chicken flap elbow movement made him instantly recognizable in an era before constant television coverage and social media. That strange rhythmic flapping left arm became his signature, something that announcers would point out and fans would mimic in the stands. While it looked peculiar, even comical to many, it helped transform him into one of the greatest second basemen in history, though few understood the mechanical reasoning behind it. What made Morgan truly special wasn't raw power or even blazing speed, but his extraordinary baseball intelligence that seemed to operate at a different level from his peers. He accumulated an impressive 689 stolen bases throughout his career, with an exceptional success rate over 80%, a statistical anomaly in an era when base running was far more aggressive but less scientific. This remarkable efficiency wasn't luck or coincidence. It was the result of careful calculation and obsessive study. Morgan spent hours analyzing pitchers' movements and catchers' throwing tendencies, looking for the slightest advantages that others missed. He could transform routine walks into immediate scoring threats, turning the simple act of taking a base into psychological warfare that forced opponents into costly mistakes. His base running wasn't just effective, it was demoralizing to anyone trying to contain him. One telling moment came in April 1975 against the San Francisco Giants. With the score tied in the 9th inning, Morgan found himself on third base. On a wild pitch, he broke for home, but deliberately slowed down to bait the catcher into making a rush throw. The strategy worked perfectly. The throw sailed wide, and Morgan scored the winning run. Later, he admitted to reporters that he'd intentionally held back to create the error. This kind of mental chess match was pure Morgan, always thinking 2 steps ahead. His aggressive base running sometimes led to confrontations. After executing a daring triple steal in one game, he found himself in a heated argument with an umpire and opposing catcher. Morgan wasn't just fast, he was fearless, willing to challenge anyone who stood in his way. The chicken flap batting stance that became his trademark actually came from practical advice. Early in his career with the Houston Astros, teammate Nellie Fox noticed Morgan kept his back elbow too low during his swing. Fox suggested he actively flap his arm like a chicken's wing to keep it elevated. Morgan adopted the technique, and that rhythmic movement before each pitch became inseparable from his identity as a player. "It kept my elbows out and got me ready to hit," Morgan explained. For a player who didn't fit the traditional power hitter mold, this adaptation worked brilliantly. The stance became so iconic that years after retirement, Morgan even led a crowd in the world's largest chicken dance at an Oktoberfest celebration, a playful nod to his famous batting style. After his playing days ended, Morgan transitioned to broadcasting, where he partnered with play-by-play announcer John Miller on ESPN's Sunday Night Baseball for 21 seasons. He received multiple Sports Emmy Awards for his commentary, becoming as familiar to a new generation of fans in the booth as he had been on the field. But this second career wasn't without controversy. From 2005 to 2008, a website called Fire Joe Morgan gained significant popularity. Created by comedy writers including Michael Schur, who later created shows like Parks and Recreation, and The Good Place, the site criticized Morgan's perceived resistance to sabermetrics and newer analytical approaches to baseball. The site's sharp, often humorous critiques became influential in sports media circles. It was voted the best sports blog of 2007 by one website, and Sports Illustrated later named it one of the most influential sports blogs of the decade. The emergence of this criticism highlighted a generational shift in baseball analysis. The very baseball intelligence that made Morgan a great player was now being questioned in his role as a commentator. There's no record of Morgan's public response to the blog, but upon his death in 2020, its creators expressed regret about naming it after him. This poignant footnote reveals the human impact behind public criticism, even when the critique itself might be intellectually sound. Morgan showed his courage off the field as well. In 1988, he experienced racial profiling at Los Angeles International Airport when police officers accosted him, threw him to the floor, handcuffed him, and arrested him, suspecting him of being a drug courier. Morgan believed he was targeted solely because of his race. Rather than letting the incident fade away, Morgan fought back through the legal system. He filed a civil rights lawsuit against the officers and the city of Los Angeles. After a lengthy legal battle with conflicting testimonies and multiple trials, Morgan prevailed. A jury awarded him $90,000 in compensatory damages and $450,000 in punitive damages, later reduced to $100,000. Most importantly, a federal court upheld his claim that his civil rights had been violated. This wasn't the only time Morgan stood firm on his principles. In 2017, as vice chairman of the Baseball Hall of Fame's board, he wrote a passionate letter to voting members of the Baseball Writers Association of America. In it, he urged voters to deny entry to players strongly linked to performance-enhancing drugs. "We hope the day never comes when known steroid users are voted into the Hall of Fame," he wrote. "They cheated. Steroid users don't belong here." Morgan conveyed that many living Hall of Famers shared this sentiment and might boycott future induction ceremonies if known steroid users were admitted. Both his stand against racial profiling and his position on performance-enhancing drugs revealed a consistent pattern. Morgan was willing to publicly defend his principles on contentious issues, regardless of potential disagreement or backlash. In his final years, Morgan battled the relentless progression of polyneuropathy, a debilitating nerve condition that slowly and mercilessly robbed him of control over his body. The disease attacked his nervous system with cruel precision, gradually diminishing the physical capabilities that had once made him exceptional. For a man who had lived for motion and sharpness, whose entire identity and career were built on physical precision and lightning-quick mental acuity, this steady deterioration was a particularly savage twist of fate. The hands that once turned double plays with millisecond timing grew unresponsive. The legs that had terrorized catchers became unreliable. The body that had been his greatest tool became his prison. He passed away on October 11, 2020, at his home in Danville, California, finally free from the physical constraints that had come to define his later life. The diagnosis naturally led many observers to reflect on the extreme physical toll exacted by a long, demanding professional baseball career at the highest level. While doctors established no direct causal link between his playing days and the polyneuropathy, the shadow of doubt remained. Morgan's 22 seasons of aggressive, all-out play, the headfirst slides, the collisions, the constant physical stress, had undoubtedly placed immense cumulative strain on his relatively small frame. The painful irony wasn't lost on those who knew him well. The same physical intensity that made him exceptional may have contributed to his suffering. The man who once controlled his body with supernatural precision ultimately lost that control entirely. Joe Morgan's story transcends baseball statistics. He was a man who achieved athletic greatness through intelligence and adaptation rather than physical dominance. He navigated the complex transition from player to commentator during a time when the very nature of baseball analysis was evolving, and he stood firm in his convictions, whether fighting racial injustice or defending the integrity of the game he loved. In the end, the fearless, flapping genius who once ruled second base was reduced to a quiet struggle against a betraying body. Friends, fans, and even critics we're left to contemplate the full picture of Joe Morgan. A hero, but a complicated one. A man whose brilliance on the field was matched by his willingness to fight for what he believed in. Off it, the baseball world lost more than a Hall of Famer when Joe Morgan died. It lost a unique mind who changed how the game could be played, a voice that spoke uncomfortable truths, and a spirit that refused to back down, even when facing his toughest opponent. His story remains a powerful reminder that greatness often comes with a price.